This is Kyler Hope,
I'm Anton Martinson.
and we have the consumer discretionary and staples, the sector overview. So looking at the S&P 500, the discretionary sector takes up 10.2% of the S&P 500 and 8.4% of our SIF portfolio.
And the consumer staples holds 7.7% of the S&P 500 and 8.4% in the SIF portfolio.
This is a graph showing consumer discretionary has outperformed the S&P 500. As you can see there, that the blue line is the S&P 500. It's outperformed it, and it kind of follows the same pattern, the ups and downs. It kind of reacts to economic change the same. And right now they're kind of both on the rise. Industries within the discretionary sector are automobile and components. This is like Ford, GM, Fiat, Chrysler, and then vehicles and all its parts. Consumer services. This refers to formulation, deformulation, technical consulting, and testing of food, herbs, vitamins, and then it's things like haircuts, auto repairs, landscaping. The next one is consumer durables and apparel. This is stuff that you don't have to buy frequently. It's made to last like over 3 years. An example I picked was like golf clubs. What kind of buy golf clubs? Like, you might keep it for your whole life. And then they can be called durable goods or durables. And then the last one is just retailing. This is a sale of merchandise from a single point of purchase directly to a customer who intends to use the product. This could be from like brick and mortar, the internet, or apps now. The industry we chose for discretionary was consumer durables and apparel. Before we get into that, our SIF holdings right now has Dollar Tree, Planet Fitness, Wynn Resorts, Mastercraft, and Nike. These three companies are just three ones that kind of stuck out to me when I was researching. Pool Corp is the world's leading independent distributor of swimming pools. Johnson Outdoors is has outdoor rec products, things like watercraft, diving equipment, camping gear, and then Callaway Golf. I kind of touched on the durability, so that kind of joins that. This is the performance between consumer discretionary as the sector to consumer durables and apparel, the industry. And as you can see, it's not doing very well. It kind of surprised me. I didn't really know what to think of this at first, but after I looked it up, it was kind of still like the spending bounced back from the recession, rising income inequality, and demanding goods at a cheaper price. People are kind of just going with the good enough type things right now, or in recent years. Some of the main metrics I picked out were sales growth. This is when the company's sales go up, their stock will be worth more. And then kind of go hand in hand is same store sales growth, is looking at each store and their sales individually. And then inventory turnover. For example, like we have Mastercraft, you can talk about boats. If you have like 3 boats worth $60,000 and they sell in 3 weeks, then that's probably good inventory turnover. Whether maybe you're keeping them on the lot for like over a year, that would be good. And then that goes with number of units being manufactured too. So if you're selling them, then you're going to be making them, and it's kind of a good metric to look at. Economic indicators are higher interest rates. It's highly sensitive to the movements of interest rates. Unemployment. And then on the flip side of unemployment is high employment rates, wage growth, and increased lending. And then they're both directly related to the economy. The key profit drivers I chose were strong economy, low interest rates, and this one I put in newly released items. I think of like Nike or something. Maybe they released a shoe or something that everyone wants. That might be a key profit driver. And then just going through the pestle analysis quick. for political, it's work week regulations, trade regulations, tariffs, obviously what's going on with China, the group before mentioned that. Economically, unemployment rate, interest rates, I've mentioned that. Social can be health, environment, culture, and then social media. Technological is cost structure, that's your fixed and variable costs, and then value chain structure is the value you're giving your customers with the good or service. And then legally, antitrust laws, making sure no one's lowering their price to push out competitors. And environmentally, air, water pollution, and waste management. The competition for new entrants I think is low. Again, talking about like Nike and like no one's gonna come in and knock them out. There might be like something that comes out that like competes with them, but they're never gonna get knocked out off the top. Existing rivals, they have companies like New Balance and Adidas to rival with, so I think that's pretty high. And then substitutes, I have medium to high because again, people can leave and choose different products or goods. And then suppliers is low. I think if you lose a supplier, like there'd be a new supplier to jump in and supply for you pretty quickly if you're a big company like that. And then buyers is very high because they control everything. If they come or they go, it kind of all depends on what you're doing. So.
And then add consumer staples. Here's the 5-year comparison with the S&P 500. The red one is the staple sector and the blue one is the S&P 500. As you can see, they both have done pretty well. S&P 500 outperformed the staple sector with 12% in the last 5 years. So it's pretty good for both of them. And then industry within the consumer staple sectors, there's 3 of them: food and staples retailing, household and personal product, food, beverage, and tobacco. And we currently have 4 companies in this sector: Walmart, Costco, food and staples retailing, and then Anheuser and Country Road in the food, beverage, and tobacco. Some notable companies within the consumer food and staple industry. It's Walmart, Costco, Kruger. 2 of them, as I said earlier, in the SIF. Kruger used to be in the SIF. I don't know when we dropped 1 year ago or something.
It was last year sometime.
Yeah. The graph here shows consumer staple, the sector, compared to food and staple industry. Both of them done well in the last 5 years, but food and staple industry have outperformed the sector itself, about 35%, so pretty good. And then the performance here for companies in the food and staples retail are counter-cyclical, and it means that it performs better when the economy is coming out from recession, but also continues to do well even in economic downturns. And this is because consumers are always in need of services and goods. And as you can see on this graph here, the red one shows a counter-cyclical company, Florida Public Utilities, and the blue one is a cyclical company, Ford Motor. And between 2000 here and 2002, when it was an economic downturn, the cyclical company decreased while the counter-cyclical, like Florida Public Utilities, continued to grow. This is because, though, as I said earlier, consumers are always in need of essential goods and services. Some metrics for the staple and food and staples industry: inventory turnover. And this is how effectively inventory is managed by the company. And then sales per square foot to measure store productivity, planned store layout. And then we have sales per employee. This is knowing that you aren't overstaffed. And then profit margin to measure profitability. Conversion rate, for example, how many sales Walmart have per visitor on their online website. And then GMROI, gross margin return on investments, and that's the firm's ability to turn inventory into cash. Next, we have some economic indicators. So obviously GDP, and this is when GDP is doing well, the economy usually does well, which is a good sign for retailers because consumers will spend more. And then consumer price index, an index that shows how much consumers are spending. And then low employment rate, and that leads to more money for consumers, which in turn will lead to more spending. Some key drivers here. I think it's kind of the same as discretionary. Stronger economy and higher income are key drivers and will make consumers spend more. And then obviously low interest rates also help since consumers are paying less, so they have more money to spend. Trends here for political trade war. This should indicate more difficulties to import goods, which in turn will lead to higher prices. And then for economy, I put income inflation causes prices to rise, affecting demand. And then for social, with consumer taste, social media, changing lifestyles. Social media impacts people to change lifestyles, for example, like choosing organic. And then for technology, I put self-checkout, operating online. And that would reduce the workforce and salary expenses. And then for legal, with rules and regulations for workplace. This is, for example, companies have to keep up with rules and regulations such as safety, required breaks, and good conditions. And then environmental transportation costs. So climate change or weather in general can cause transportation costs to go up, which will make prices to go up as well. And then lastly here, competition for its 5 sources. So threat of entry, put that as low, because it would be more difficult for a new store to compete with like established companies such as Walmart and Costco. And then for power of suppliers, put low to medium. Because many companies wants to provide Walmart and Costco with their goods, and this gives Walmart high availability of supply, which gives them the power and not the supplier. So not the power. And then power of buyers, put that as high because everyone can kind of choose wherever they want to go if they're like loyal to a company. So, such a local store like Front Meyer, like people want to go there instead of Walmart. So it's kind of their opinion. And then threat of substitutes, put that as medium. The high availability of substitutes affects the profitability of an industry. This is because consumer can choose to buy the substitute instead of like the industry's product. And then rivalry amongst existing firms, I put that as high. This is because many established companies compete about the same consumers, and this makes Walmart and Costco kind of lowering their prices or higher their prices. That's it. Thank you.
So, couple like bigger things that I'd said already to some of the other groups, like with Pestle, I'd say use it only when it's helpful. Like do it yourself so you know you're like being thorough and covering all those factors, but I'd probably stick to only a few of those factors and talk about them. Like for example, for both consumer discretionary and consumer staples, maybe not all of them, all industries within those 2 sectors, but for a lot of them, social changes and technological changes are huge right now. Like trends towards shopping online, that's nothing new, but it's causing a lot of retailers a lot of strife. Like, where do you guys think Amazon would fall in this industry classification scheme?
Probably both of them. You can get
See,
essential
so
goods there and
a
you can
company
get-
is only going to be classified as one thing, right? So it's based.
discretionary.
Yeah, it's a consumer discretionary company, and people oftentimes are surprised to hear that that's not a technology company, right?
You
It's
could
a,
even call it a staple too, because people get like their needs off it, like they get their groceries.
yeah, I mean, yes.
It's kind
You-
of
you-
strange, but
I could, most people would misclassify it first as a technology company. You could I mean, like I know my own consumer behavior, I get staples from Amazon, not really discretionary things. I get like dog food and paper towels
yeah,
there.
yeah.
But the reason why I bring up the example of Amazon is just to think about like a company like that is like the competition for a lot of these traditional brick and mortar retailers. So thinking about like online sales metrics, some of the same metrics like the group that covered IT talked about, because everything's becoming digital, might actually be relevant to you guys as well. But you guys did pick pretty good metrics. Your metrics were strong. But I think about like those big social trends and not just, if the PESTLE framework isn't doing it for you, if it isn't helpful, then you don't necessarily need to present the PESTLE framework, just think about the big trends in your sector. Like things like younger generations are more apt to opt for experience type based gifts instead of goods, which is another thing that might influence both of your sectors, more discretionary than staples. But how many of you probably said, I'd rather have a vacation than a new XYZ, whatever? Anybody?
Yeah.
Maybe that's, okay, there we go. 5 forces. Be clear on the differences between substitutes and competitors, and between, like what impacts like the threat of new entrants. So like those are the barriers to entry we talked about. Like a substitute good or service, maybe instead of going and buying my groceries in Fred Meyer, which is owned by Kroger, by the way, I order online through the Postmates app, and my groceries are delivered. Something like that would be maybe considered a substitute, whereas Safeway and Fred Meyer are direct competitors. So I'd be a little clearer on your 5 forces. But otherwise, you guys did a good job identifying metrics. So I think we're off to a good start, everybody. Okay? Thoughts, questions? Okay, so I'll probably